learning
It's uncomfortable, it's difficult, but the most rewarding activity.
So take me through that.
Well, so it starts with I don't feel I'm in a situation I don't feel I'm prepared for, or I anticipate a situation I don't feel I'm prepared for. If I engage it, it's difficult because I have to challenge myself. I have to accept something that I need to improve. Yet at the end, it's the most rewarding place to be and the most gratifying place to be, next to helping others learn, which might be the most.
Tell me a little bit about what concepts we're discussing here today are resonating with you.
Well, what I'm reflecting on, as always, is where do we add value to the organization as learning functions, as learning professionals. And it strikes me that we exist in a couple of spaces where we're talking about digital strategy, and at the same time we're dealing with a human species that has not evolved tremendously since we started this learning profession. So things like there's this trend towards micro-learning and learning on demand and having learning on the job, and we've been talking about that for a long time, and of course that's now digitally enabled. At the same time, it's interesting to see that in some cases in structure-led training, although it's less of a percentage of the amount of learning, it's more important. Because if we're trying to change mindsets, if we're trying to go through that breakthrough learning, there's still time that we have to take people out of the work if we're going to reflect on that.
Yeah.
As we think about things that we now know more about the way people learn, what's changed and what hasn't changed. So people have learned through the telling of stories forever, right? Now we know from brain science that yes, in fact, people learn through the telling of stories. The role of emotion, the value of that, the process by which you learn through coming through some sort of comforting experience where your expectations don't meet reality, and you have to learn and practice and adjust. So all those things are valuable to us. Now, and as we think of role, the other part is we exist sort of in that gap between digital strategy and the realities of human beings, and then we also exist within that gap with what are those major trends in the workforce, and how do we solve for them? The gaps that we see that we know we can predict that there are certain types of roles, certain types of jobs will disappear. We can predict that there are capabilities of not specific jobs, but roles. Data science, whether or not you're a data scientist, or you're a learning professional, or you're a claims professional, or you're whatever, that capability is required. So how can we provide an approach that allows people to understand where they want to go, what those requirements are, and then different ways of getting there. So things that are coming out of the last day and a half is, instead of us taking that central role where we manage things through a learning management system, which is that sort of control mindset. If we can't measure it, if we can't track it, then oh my gosh, does it happen? If we don't report on it, God help us.
Fall in the woods.
Yes, exactly. On the other hand, if we can, through partnerships and things that have been evolving for years, the MOOCs or some of the vendors that we've spoken to, partnerships with universities, find different ways to have a different value proposition for employees to say that if I am part of your company, you will help me understand that these are the directions I can go professionally. This is what's required to go in those directions, and you will help me find ways to get that. And that could be certificate programs. We're seeing a lot more interest, by the way, in certificate programs in our company. Yet, our policies aren't necessarily designed to support that. We need to think about that, and I'm taking that with me from here. Or just, and the idea of branding, like that concept of we can't promise you employment. We can promise you capability building. We can promise you better employability. And as long as you see that in here and we enable you to adapt, then we can predict that there's going to be a continuing mutually beneficial partnership between you and the company in whatever happens. I like the idea of changing some of our language. We talk a lot about millennials. I have 2 of them in my family, and again, people are still people, and they're still, you know, in many ways we're very much alike. But talking about the modern learner, which feels to me a lot more inclusive. And we talk about the modern learner, we talk about these gaps that we see, be it in IT roles, data science, and those are just the ones that come up a lot. In your particular field or whatever industry that you're in, you can identify certain job functions. But the idea of that we have to be able to rebuild and reskill many of the people that might be displaced by that. And some of the things that I saw talked about here, I see going on in our company, but in pockets. You know, particularly between the IT world, as they're seeing fundamental shifts in how you develop applications, be it in an agile environment otherwise, then some job roles, you know, tend to go away. Yet, how can you, these are people that have been close to those job roles that are required in the future. How can you, again, with partnerships, giving people accountability, so it's not something we're doing to them, it's something we're enabling them to do. So let's expand that thinking. I mean, it's talked about in IT. You know, why not other functional roles within your organization? So those are some of the things that I'm taking back.
Well, it's fascinating that you were talking earlier about the reality that human beings are emotional beings.
Right.
And oftentimes, true deep learning is tied to feeling some type of emotion for what the content you're dealing with.
Yeah, we try to drive emotion out of the dialogue when we're trying to change
Yeah,
people
you really
to train
think,
people.
you know, of learning and skill sets and things of that nature as being emotion-free, when really it's not.
It's emotionally dependent.
How do
Sorry,
you
so-
sort of control for that or address that? Or
Well, there's fear in organizations and in leaders and in people to oftentimes bring their full self to the dialogue.
Yeah.
So, and part of that full self is how do you feel about things? And as we saw in some of these presentations, that stickiness depends on some emotional connection. So I've connected to this content. So how can you create places and environments and contexts that you can help people reflect on how they feel about their role, how they've been treated as, let's say you're trying to develop new leaders. They've all been led by somebody, and we tend to learn to lead by the people that have led us.
Yeah.
So how did that make you feel? And what impact did that have? I mean, the ideology of the word emotion is to cause motion. Right? It causes us to do things that we wouldn't do otherwise. And we talk about wanting people to be passionate about their work.
But then we take all the emotion out.
Well,
of it.
or yeah, and that's an absolute statement, you know, which is not true, but fully true. But so these are some of the things that I think start to reflect on. Again, taking people out of the work and maybe out of the workplace. Again, oftentimes, if you want to help people learn something new, we have to be a little bit uncomfortable. And how do you create a way that people can actually create that discomfort, to create that feeling that, wait, oh my gosh, I'm not prepared to meet this new challenge, either as a leader or for the organization. And that's a healthy thing.
Yeah. I'm interested in hearing from a personal standpoint on your career journey, what role learning has played for you and how you've navigated learning to get to where you are.
You can see I'm not new to my career here, you know, and the periods I've stagnated versus the periods where I've grown have oftentimes been the most painful periods where you really jump in with something, you know, something new. And where whenever you find yourself coasting a little bit, then you take some risks. And maybe that's partly what our job is as leaders, is to create an environment where people can take those risks